Welcome to MazanderCast,
a Persian podcast about myth, magic, and mustahiyar.
You tried that phlegm, didn't you?
Mustahiyar.
We're going to work on that phlegm, my love. This is our pilot episode, so welcome. We're going to introduce ourselves first. Fanfare,
It's the beginning to hopefully a long series of episodes about Persian culture and some of the weird mythology that's cropped up over the years. And,
some of the interesting food.
Empires past. Interesting food.
The social rules.
The beautiful clothes. The beautiful cities.
Yeah.
The beautiful people.
Aw, I think you're trying to flirt with me now. We should probably start by introducing ourselves. I'm your co-host, Sarah.
And I'm your co-host, Seth.
One of us probably has to be at least a little Persian for this to work.
If it's not evident, we are, in fact, married. I am the tender white in this relationship, and this is my beautiful Persian queen.
I'm only half Persian, but thank you. Continue the compliments. So you're not Persian. Well, tell me about your family, though. Where are you from?
I crawled out of the depths of the American Southeast. My mother is from the Southeast like me. Ooh, thunder. Ooh, that was a good one there.
Some storms coming.
My father is from the American flat nothing, that is Kansas. He was a farm boy. My mother was a beach kid. And somehow they came together and made me.
Yay! Which is very nice.
I am an engineer from the great American state of Mississippi.
That's the best.
Where I reside with my lovely wife here.
Hello. Like I said before, I am only half Persian. My mother is from Iran. She came here to study. My dad is from Iowa. So he is also a farmer.
Another flat state.
Another flat.
Just corn instead of wheat.
Corn. Oh my gosh. If you ever go to Iowa in the summertime, just the sea of green that is just all the corn. It's beautiful. And the air is so nice. Love it. I always found that kind of interesting that both of our dads grew up on farms and whatnot. And you and I are such...
City folk.
We're such city folk. we could never properly
I wouldn't make it on a farm. Maybe if I was a little bit younger, but I wouldn't know the first thing about farming.
Yep. But growing up, I had American dad, Persian mom. It was very cool. There's a lot of Persian norms that kind of became norms for me. And I know that relaying it to you was kind of one of the big hurdles when we first started dating.
Right, let's talk about your mom. Where is your mom from?
My mother mostly grew up in Tehran. So
that's the capital city of... Okay. Yes.
But we have family in Shiraz. We have family in a small village called Alvir. We have family all over, really. Kind of
a little country, little city too, huh?
Yeah, it's a town of about 300 people, 400 people. It's a fairly small area. We also have family in California, but my mother didn't grow up in California, like I said. She mostly grew up in the northern part of Iran, and then she came here to study, and she's still here. So, yeah. But going back to this podcast, like I said, when you and I first started dating, you had a whole lot of questions for me about Persian culture and Persian norms, and we had a lot of hurdles to go over with that. And then I kind of started bringing up some of the mythology and stuff, and you wanted to learn more about that.
Very much so, because your mythology is crazy.
It's a lot of fun.
It's a lot like other mythologies in that it makes no sense.
Makes no sense, but it's still a good time.
It's a good time, yeah.
And besides that, I also just, being Persian, a lot of people come to me and ask me a lot of the same questions that you've always asked me. So I thought, why not just make a podcast out of it? So here we are. That's what we're doing. So just from these past 8 years, what are some things that you know about Persian culture or Persian social rules and stuff?
Well, it was a little bit of a system shock for me. But oddly enough, not as different as you would think from having grown up in the South. That was one of the things I I thought was really interesting about your culture was how weirdly similar your family is to mine, and the way that we deal with each other. Kind of some of the big stuff was getting to meet your mom for the first time. Who, for those of you who don't know, her mom is very intimidating when you meet her for the first time.
Oh, I will argue
especially
that...
if you have business with her daughter.
I will argue that most Persian parents are fairly intimidating because, and I've noticed this happen, regardless of if it was a dating situation or a friend situation, if I brought anybody new home, my mother interrogated them. She wanted to know, what did you do? What did your parents do? If you were in college, what were you studying? And this is across the board for a lot of Iranian parents. When they find out their children are interacting with other people, they want to know everything about them. So I think it was a little bit more intense for you, though, because, you were dating
I
me.
was dating you.
She gave you that look.
She had I'll save that story for another time. But as far as the cultural aspect, getting to know your mother and getting to know all of the Iranians that we were living around and the folks that we would go to your mom's parties with, and the things that you would try and teach me about ahead of time so I wouldn't come across as rude. Especially going to a party where Persians are present. That's alliterative. It's considered very rude if you don't introduce yourself to everybody at the party. Mm-hmm. The same when you're about to leave, you have to say goodbye to everybody.
Yep.
There is a heavy emphasis on politeness that may come across a little odd to somebody who isn't from Persian culture. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that a little later, but I'm speaking mostly of Tarof.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We should definitely cover that this first episode.
Which, yeah, that made some things
major, polite rule in Persian culture. You have to know about Tarof before you interact with any Persians. Persians
and Iranian people are very curious about you, especially when you're a new person. I was asked a lot of questions about the kind of things that I do, what I was studying at the time. Persian folks are very, very friendly, incredibly friendly. They want to know everything about you. And I will say that was very similar to when I went to meet your family for the first time. It was a Thanksgiving dinner, so they were all there. And there was just that sort of warmth, that generosity, that genuine interest. But also there was just you didn't have enough on your plate, you better eat more. Oh, gosh, yes. There's an openness, you openly tease each other to show fondness, and that's also something that my Iranian family does. That's another good point I'm glad you brought up. The teasing is rampant, especially if they get to know you well enough. Yes. They want to know everything about you so they can use it as ammunition against you. But it's all in good fun, and, if you're being teased, then it's a sign of affection, and they feel comfortable enough to kind of mess with you. In not a mean way, but in an affectionate way. I'm going to relay my favorite teasing story from hanging out with our Persian friends. Okay. We have two friends who are kind of in our age group like us who went with us canoeing on a large lake a few years ago, back before we got married. I remember this. Go on. One of them was deeply afraid of alligators. So we consistently teased him about feeding him to the alligators in the lake. Oh my gosh, it was such a good time. He kept looking for them. He kept trying to see if he could spot one, and he'd get nervous and shift around in his seat whenever we teased him. At some point, we were near the edge, and I tried to trick him by making my eyes go wide and turning and running, but he didn't fall for it. Even when he was nervous, he would still poke fun at us. A couple of times he would say that if he saw an alligator, he was going to try and yank me out of the boat so it would get me instead of him. I remember him also telling his wife that he didn't care if the alligator came for them. He was just going to leave her. But again, it's all a good time. And that kind of
teasing and that kind of silliness and that openness is something that I definitely got when I was meeting your Southern family.
Yes, my family is all about the teasing.
Yeah. And it's kind of the same in Iran. Once you make that connection with the person, you create that friendship, just prepare to be messed with, really.
And the same with the eating.
Yes. Oh gosh.
Put some meat on those bones. You're thin as a rail.
What, you've only had 3 helpings? Where's your 4th helping?
I'm far from being skinny. I'm a fairly heavy-set person. I still get like food shoveled in my face when I go see your mom.
Can I say something else that is very common in Persian culture and Southern culture?
Mm-hmm.
When it's time to go, how long do you think it takes to say goodbyes?
In both cultures, I'd say it takes a little bit, and that's assuming you don't get pulled into a last-minute conversation. Especially when you're making plans about the next time you're going to see them.
Yep. I'd say it takes an hour.
Depends on how quickly you got to get out of there.
If you have to very quickly get out of there, it takes about an hour. If you got time to spare, it'll be 3 hours. What did you say?
It's something like that. You better start planning ahead about your exit.
Yep. You better, if you're like, okay, we have to leave in the next hour, let's start saying goodbye now.
If you need to leave within the next 30 minutes, you should probably just plan to amputate an arm or something. And then maybe they'll let you get away in half an hour.
I don't know if we've ever had to go to that extreme.
I'm bleeding.
At the very least, you have to say sorry over and over again, repeatedly, and just be like, I'm so sorry.
I cut my own arm off.
I know what's going on here, and I'm being so rude. I know that I'm leaving suddenly. Please find it in your heart to forgive me as I exit out the door in 10 minutes' time.
So far, we've kind of referred to the folks we know as Iranian or Persian, but like for some folks, they might not know what the difference is. What exactly is what does it mean to be Persian versus Iranian?
So there's actually no difference. It's the same region, but of course, modern day Iran is what's left of the Persian Empire. So the very first king, Cyrus the Great, or Kurosh, that's his Persian name, he was the first king of Persia, and at that time, that part of the world was under the control of the Median Empire. This is before it was the Persian Empire, it was the Median Empire. They were not very kind rulers. It was a very harsh and unjust kingdom. They weren't the best.
The Medes, the Medes.
Sure, you could call them that. Lord. Okay.
The Medes of Medea.
You know what? If you're going to be this way, I'm just going to tell my joke then. I'll tell my terrible joke. The Medes, the Median Empire, was a mean place. So it was an average empire.
I don't get the joke.
The Median Empire was a mean place. So I'd say their rule was about average. Get on my level.
That's a good joke. I'm sorry for those who don't get that.
It's a math joke. Run with it.
It's a stats joke.
Anyways, either way, the Median Empire was an average place. So the Median Empire was...
The mean medians were average.
Mean medians were average. And Kurosh thought he could do a better job. Now, Kurosh himself came from a small province above the Persian Gulf called Persis. Sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think the word Persia came from?
That thing you just said.
So, about 550 BC, Kurosh began conquering neighboring territories, and he eventually defeated the Median Empire, and he established the Persian Empire. So it stretched from, I'd say, modern-day Turkey to the Indus Valley. It was about 2 million square miles, and held 44% of the world's population.
What does that even mean?
Okay.
Like, how big is the U.S. compared to that?
the U.S. is about 3 million square miles from coast to coast.
Well,
from East Coast to West Coast.
that's the U.S., right? Not North America?
No, that's the United States of America. That's our territory. So it doesn't sound very big, but at the time, it did hold 44% of the world's population. So that in itself is pretty big.
Wow.
If you go by those standards, by population, it was the biggest empire. If you go by just the stretch of land, it wasn't the biggest.
They got all the big cities and all that in there.
Yeah. I kind of want to get on my pedestal and just brag about Kurosh, because he's like one of my most favorite dudes.
Why is that?
Well, he was an unusually benevolent ruler, and he had a lot of forward ideas for that time in history. So during this time, if you conquer a part of land, the people on that land, they would become subclass in your new empire. They would have to worship under whatever religion you established. The prisoners of war were treated pretty terribly. Is
that what made the average median so mean?
I guess so, but again, it was kind of the norm back then. That was just, if war came around and you got taken over, just prepare to be enslaved. And it's not just a median thing. That was just what everybody was doing. But when Kurosh conquered cities and towns, he allowed people to keep their own religions and their own customs. He gave people the same equal status as the Persians. And then his prisoners of war, they were treated remarkably well. So he helped to rebuild the towns and the roads after the battles were done. This is one of the things he's very famous for. When he conquered Babylon, he freed the enslaved Jews that were there, and he helped them to build their second temple.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And Kurosh is also mentioned in the Bible. He's apparently was very well liked in the Bible as well. He's a very cool dude all around. But yeah, the biggest thing that he's known for is establishing a multicultural acceptance throughout his empire, which was a brand new thing. But here's some other things he established. So his government he was the main king, but throughout the region you had satraps, or sort of vassal kings. It's kind of like how
governors compared, or like senators and governors compared to the president.
Similar to that, yeah. It's like how here in the United States we have our 50 different states, and they each have their own smaller government, but we're all part of the whole. It's kind of like that. So some of your satraps were going to be really awesome. Some of them were going to be manipulative jerks. It just kind of depended on what region of the Persian Empire you were in.
Those are the Median ones, right?
I don't know about you, man.
The Meanies.
So another thing that Kurosh did was he created a lot of roads that stretched throughout the kingdom. They included inns and way stops along the way, so that any merchants that were traveling through that area, they had safe passage and they were able to travel easily to sell their goods. And that really helped to increase the wealth of the Persian Empire overall. He really encouraged and promoted education. That was a really big thing. He established laws of equality between men and women. And the justice system that he set up ensured fair treatment for many, many folks. So after Kurosh, there were some kings that followed that were good, some that were bad. It was just kind of a mix. And the borders of the Persian Empire, they would expand and recede over the years. At its peak, it stretched that 2 million square miles I mentioned earlier. But what we see today is what was left over after 1857. There was a lot of wars.
Wait, it lasted that long?
Well, it kind of got bigger and smaller over the years. It was receding smaller and smaller. But the borders that you see today are what's left over after 1857.
I gotcha.
So those were the final borders established.
After all the other countries or modern countries that were kind of a part of it separated and made their own governments.
Pretty much, yeah. And what was left here was after the Persian government had a lot of wars between the Russians and the British. And their borders were narrowed down to what we see today. And there was a lot of problems with outside Western governments, especially the British and Russian governments, having a lot of influence on the Persian people and the Persian government. So one thing that they did in 1935, the country was like, okay, Tired of all these outside influences, all these Western countries know us as Persia. We're going to go back to our roots. We're going to call ourselves Iran. And they wanted to call themselves Iran because it's derived from the word Aryan. This is the part of the world where Aryans originated from. So nowadays, people will use either term to refer to themselves. They'll sometimes call themselves Iranians. They'll sometimes call themselves Persians. When I was little and I told people about Iran, people were like, where's that? What is that? But then when I said Persia, they're like, oh, I get it.
Like from the movies.
Like from the movies. But now that I'm older and there's a little bit more negative news on TV and people hear the word Iran and they immediately think a lot of negative thoughts, I think a lot of people from Iran call themselves Persian. I'm Persian.
I am like the cat.
As Maz Jobrani, famous Persian comedian, has said, I am like the cat.
Oh no, it wasn't Maz Jobrani. It was Kayvon.
No, it was Maz Jobrani.
Oh, was it?
Kayvon's the one who did the Tarof joke.
Oh, okay. We'll get to that later then.
Yeah. But no, saying you're Persian kind of disassociates with all the negative things that you hear. It makes people kind of remember the ancient empire that created the nice, beautiful rugs that you see, and the beautiful music, and the adorable kitty cats with the smushed up face.
With the smushy faces and the fluffy butts.
So that's a brief summary of the accurate history, but of course, like many countries, you have more of a mythical history with kings that have fought demons and learned different spells and lived for hundreds of years. So if you want that version of history, the cool one in my opinion,
the weird Dungeons and Dragons style level 20 shenanigans that they get up to, weird stuff like that.
Yes, if you want all of that, then you're going to want to read the Shahnameh. So I think you've read a bit of the Shahnameh in the past, right?
You and I went over the first, chapter together. That was about kind of the first few kings of Persia, or what would become Persia.
Mm-hmm. So, as you saw in that, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in it.
Right. There's folks in, leopard skins, fighting demons barehanded, and animals talking. There's an angel at one point who comes and tells you, no, don't smite the devil. It's a little weird.
Yep. So the fun thing is that these stories that we're going to be reading, they're older than the Persian Empire itself. They used to be told orally for many years, the kind of stories that you share around the cooking fire. Some of the stories that were shared around these cooking fires and whatnot, they actually didn't make it to the Shahnameh. There were previous attempts of writing down the stories, but the Shahnameh was going to be the first major compilation of all of it.
Kind of the summation of all those major legends. A little bit like, stories about the Trojan War being summarized in the Iliad and the Odyssey, and those same kind of stories about the gods being summarized in Old Norse poetry. Yeah.
You probably had several attempts before that of people writing down those stories, but the really big ones are the ones we remember today, like the Poetic Edda, the Odyssey, like you mentioned. The Shahnameh is very similar to that. It's a massive book. It's 3 times the size of the Iliad. And it depicts ancient history of Persia all the way up to the Islamic conquest of Persia. And all of it is written in poetry. So...
But it doesn't rhyme.
Well...
Can't be poetry if it doesn't rhyme.
Well, I'm going to let you in on something there, husband. You and I cannot read Farsi.
What?
Yeah.
What?
I can speak it.
I can... pretend to read it.
I'd love to see that. We'll do a segment on that. But no, the copies of the books that you and I have been reading are in English. And I believe that when these translators got a hold of the book, they said, oh, well, instead of worrying about making it rhyme, let's just make sure that the meaning makes it across. Mm-hmm. So that's why the versions that you and I are reading do not have any poetry in them, but the original does. And to my listeners, if anybody gets the chance to have an Iranian read the Shahnameh to you, take that chance, because it is beautiful to listen to, the rhythm of it, and it's It's very beautiful to listen to. If I could learn to read Farsi, it would be so that I could read the Shahnameh in that kind of poetic, rhythmic style. It's really beautiful. But it's also very difficult. It's kind of like in the same vein of someone asking us to read Shakespeare. You really have to focus in order to read it correctly and not stumble over it.
Or, God forbid, trying to read like Canterbury Tales in the original Old English.
Oof. I don't know if I've ever attempted that. I've looked at that and my eyes went all dizzy.
Have you ever seen what English used to look like and the way people used to spell things?
You know,
The letter Y had a TH sound.
I did take a history of English class in college. I know what our language has done in the past. I know what a mishmash Frankenstein of a language it is.
Crazy, like, sushi roll of words.
But getting back to the Shahnameh, like I said, it's all written in poetry. It is actually composed of 50,000 couplets. So that's 2-line verses.
What?
Yeah. 50,000
That's like 100,000 singlets.
That's one way you could put it.
Or, if my math is correct, that is 25,000 quadrillets.
Husband, are you okay? So, besides it being 50,000 couplets, it's also 62 stories, 990 chapters. So, how long do you think it would take to write all of that down? Take a guess.
Gosh, that's a good chunk of somebody's life, I imagine,
Oh,
if you have to
yeah.
make it into poetry.
Yes.
Probably
You
a
not
lot of
only have to,
scrapped verses, a lot of pages that didn't make it in, all kinds of...
And you had to kind of go around and do your research. You had to ask different people about their, the stories that they've heard. You have to make sure you have it all down. Then you got to figure out how to make it all rhyme. So, give it a guess. How long do you think it took?
25 years?
That's a good guess. It's a little bit higher than that.
40 years?
A little less than that.
39 years?
Lower.
30 years.
Good guess. 33 years, to be exact.
I was never going to get that.
No, you weren't, but I want to see how close you could guess. So, yeah, 33 years of your life working on one book. So, the one who wrote the Shahnameh, who spent 33 years of his life writing it, was a man called Abolghasem Ferdowsi Tusi.
Ooh, that's a fancy name.
You can just say
He's got like
Ferdowsi.
4 names. Ferdowsi.
The last one, Tusi, is because he came from the town of Tus.
Oh.
So a lot of times if you meet an Iranian and their last name ends with a E at the end, or that letter I, it's saying you are of something. You're either of a person or of a town.
Right,
Something.
kind of that old-fashioned way of saying where you're from, or like Geralt of Rivia.
Yeah, like how some people have Mac in their last name.
William Shakespeare of Avon.
Similar to that, yeah. So we'll just call him Ferdowsi, because I think that's going to be easier for you. He began writing the Shahnameh in 977 AD, and he finished it on March the 8th, 1010 AD. So he had been writing it on his own for a while. At the beginning of his time, he had patronage from the Samanids, who were in control of Persia at the time. But later on, he secured the patronage of Shah Ghazni.
Mahmud?
Ghazni. Yeah, that's a G in the back of the throat. Don't try it,
I'm going to choke on that
G. Here's the interesting thing. Ferdowsi was not the first poet to start this project. There was another poet before him, and he had started writing it. He had written down maybe about 1,000 verses before he was assassinated.
What?
Yeah. The Shahnameh was actually very controversial at the time, let's just say.
Dang.
So, like I said, these stories are older than the Persian Empire itself. They had been around for hundreds of years, and they actually followed an old religion called Zoroastrianism. So
that's a mouthful too.
Zoroastrianism, yes, is an old Persian religion. Actually, no, I really shouldn't even say that. The religion of Zoroastrianism is older than the Persian Empire. It just kind of originated in that area. So everyone's stories came from that religion.
It's older than the movie Zorro too, right?
Definitely, my love, definitely. So during Ferdowsi's time, the country and the royal court, they were very pro-Arab, very anti-Persian. Again, this was after the Islamic conquest. Many people of the Islamic faith who were in power, they didn't really want to see the glorification of a Persian religion. They kind of worried it would undermine the Arab influences throughout the country, and they really didn't want to reignite Persian pride in their culture. It's easier if you divide a group of people from their culture, they're easier to sway towards new and advanced ideas, I suppose. So they were pushing a lot of pro-Arab ideas, like having all their literature be written in Arabic. And Ferdowsi's book really snubbed that idea. Like, he used as much of the original Persian language with as little Arab influence as possible. For one thing, he referred to the Persian language as Parsi, which was what it used to be called. It was the Arab influence and the Islamic influence that called the language Farsi. It used to be called Parsi.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. But yeah, this book glorified these kings and heroes who followed the Zoroastrian faith, and he also kind of gave a lot of underhanded tones of disapproval for Arabic ideas and cultural traditions. So he was really pushing some
like the story of Zahak.
Yeah, like the story of Zahak.
Which we'll get to at some point.
Yeah, Zahak is very much I don't know how much of that is accurate to its old stories as opposed to how Ferdowsi wrote it. But we'll get to that one. So, of course, with all the strife and the controversy surrounding him making this book, some really interesting tales were told about Ferdowsi and the Shah for whom he was writing it. Remember Shah Ghazni? Mm-hmm. So, the Shah was not a particularly religious man, but he would use religion as an excuse to gain power or a reason to give to war, like you do. So at the beginning of his reign, his ambitions and who he wanted to be popular with were different, so he didn't mind giving patronage to Ferdowsi to continue writing his book. So he's like, yeah, I'll give you 10,000 gold pieces for the project, and in addition to that, I will give you 1 gold coin for every couplet.
Is that why it's so long? Is that why there's 50,000 of those bad boys?
Because Ferdowsi's like, oh yeah, I'm going to get my money's worth.
I'll get me some drinking gold.
You know what? It makes me wonder if I had a project like that, I would start making things up just to get more gold. You're like, this totally didn't happen, but who's going to say?
Oh yeah, Rustam's about to face down this monster, but first we're going to talk about the nice sandwich he had prepared for him prior to the battle, maybe the life story of the chef who made it.
Let's give every single detail about the sword that he's swinging and how it shines in the sunlight.
It shines in the sunlight.
Let's talk about God
burns.
Really quick for a few verses.
Let's thank God for this. For Rustam.
Thank God for Rustam. So, regardless of whatever, we're not gonna, put words in Ferdowsi's mouth or say what he did, but he did write those 50,000 couplets, and so he was owed, that 50,000 gold plus that extra 10,000, 60,000 gold was what this man earned. Ooh. Yeah, that's a whole lot of money. So from here, the story kind of splits into different versions. There's some stories that say Shah Mahmud kind of realized that having a pro-Persian book during a time when his Arab ties were what were helping him stay in power wasn't such a good idea. He should probably not bring this book out into the public. And then there's other people who say that Shah Mahmud himself didn't have a problem with it, but his courtier, who he said, hey, collect this money and send it to Ferdowsi, the courtier was like, I don't like Ferdowsi. I think he's a heretic for writing about this ancient religion. I'm not going to give him what he's earned. But either way, whatever the story says happened, Ferdowsi did not get what he promised. What do you think happened?
I'm gonna guess that the courtier kept the money for himself.
That is a good guess. But I will say that Ferdowsi did get something. It just wasn't 60,000 gold.
A pat on the back.
No, it wasn't
Thank
that
you.
either. No. It wasn't 60,000
A nice dinner.
gold. I'm going to put it that way. It wasn't gold that he received.
It was cow manure for his garden.
60,000 cow manure?
60,000 cow manure.
Give it one more guess.
Bricks of poop. Copper.
Close enough. It was 60,000 silver pieces. So, Ferdowsi is in the bathhouse. He receives this payment. He is absolutely furious.
As you do when you're snubbed for a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, he worked on this book for 33 years. And this is what he's paid. I think...
Do you know how many couplets I wrote? Exactly 50,000.
Do you know how many couplets I made up? I mean... But no, he's promised 60,000 gold pieces. He's given 60,000 silver pieces? Like, that's less than half.
Yeah, that courtier is being a real meanie mead.
Oh my god. Or the Shah is being a real meanie mead. He's letting his meaty inside take over.
You're being a real mead right now.
But yeah, he spends all those years collecting these stories and writing, and you think that the Shah is going to keep his word and give what he promised to you, and you kind of had to probably fight all this controversy for all these years. So what would your response be if you're here in the bathhouse and here it is, hey, Ferdowsi, the money of your 33 years of your life being spent on this book. Here it is. Less than half of what you were promised.
You go to deliver that book to the king, and you yeet that thing right into the fountain in front.
Or maybe cudgel somebody with the silver pieces.
Yeah, go find whoever's responsible for the accounting and express your opinion to them via a violent beating with a sack of metal.
Yeah, you can't exactly do it to the king. You cudgel the king, you got some consequences going there.
Or you take his throne and become king yourself.
Man, that would have been something. But
I
no.
don't know, probably not.
Ferdowsi isn't that kind of man. He is a poet. He is not a man of war and a man of fighting. At least not with the sword. Definitely with the pen. But here's what he does. He receives the 60,000 silver pieces, and he refuses to keep any of it. He gives all of it away. He gives some of it to the servant who delivered the money. He gives some to the man who owns the bathhouse. He gives some to a beverage seller.
Spite charity.
Spite charity. Anyone who
You
passes
get some money,
away,
little boy. You get some money, orphanage.
just throw
You know
it
what?
into a random window.
I don't even know you. You get like 10,000.
All of it was dispersed among just random folks. It's a very spiteful charity.
That is
indeed.
the angriest charity I've ever heard.
So,
You have to be pretty spiteful. I don't know what that translates to in like normal, in like US dollars. If I got, if I was promised $1 million for something and I got 500,000, I don't think I would just start giving it out to people unless I was furious.
I don't know. I think it's a matter of pride in this case. It was
matter of
he's
honor.
Really spitting on this really important work.
Patu.
But word gets back to the Shah about what Ferdowsi did, and he isn't too happy about it. He did what most kings do when they're mad at a subject.
Off with his head?
Yeah, pretty much. He threatens to kill him, has Ferdowsi driven out of the city, basically exiled, and Ferdowsi goes to live in his hometown of Tus, and from there, he still has the Shahnameh with him. He presents it to another ruler in the area, only this time he's added several couplets that are calling out the Shah Mahmud, and criticizing him pretty strongly things like if you had actually been born under royalty, you would have had more grace. Says a few very rude things about his mother.
Is that still in the Shahnameh?
No. The ruler that he gave it to thought it would be more diplomatically polite to have all that removed. Man, I kind of wish we still had it. I think only 6 verses of it are still around. Like, if you research it online, you can find it. But, he did not mince words. Like I said, this man doesn't go to war with a sword. He goes to war with a pen. He definitely made it clear how he felt about the Shah.
I'm just going to say, that's like Dante Alighieri putting all of his enemies in Dante's Inferno and saying, yeah, all these people, they went to hell.
Because I don't like them.
Because I don't like them.
So, several years later, the Shah starts to regret how things played out with Ferdowsi. You know, in the stories where he was the one who planned to switch to silver, he just kind of realizes he was being a jerk. In the versions where his courtier did the switch, he either has the man exiled or executed, but regardless, the Shah decides he wants to make amends, and he does send the 60,000 gold to Ferdowsi. He gives it to the servants and says, send it to Ferdowsi living in Tusi. The story says that when the servant arrived there, the gates opened for a funeral procession that was carrying out the coffin of Ferdowsi.
Wow. That's some deep irony right now. I almost don't believe that.
That's some legit irony. And honestly, I've heard this story so many times, I kind of wonder if it's true or if people just want it to be true.
That's a good story, man. I wouldn't be surprised if it was not true. But at the same time, I get the feeling that gold never made it to poor Ferdowsi.
Yeah, it is known that he died poor and brokenhearted, but one of the things that he always said was that at least through the Shahnameh I will be immortalized. And that is true. Right. We to this day have this book. Everyone who is Persian knows who Ferdowsi is. And
it's thanks to him that the culture kind of survived and those stories are still here.
Very much true. I think that if he didn't write this book and if he didn't spend so many years of his life on it, we would not remember Persian culture the way we do today. He truly did reignite Persian pride with that book. And even to this day, Persians really revere the Shahnameh. Just the stories, everyone knows the stories. People will even name their children from characters out of the Shahnameh.
Oh, wow. Like what?
Well, for example, my younger brother, his name is Kaveh.
Oh, yeah.
That is a name from the Shahnameh.
The blacksmith from the story of Zahak.
Which we'll cover in a little bit, yeah. My favorite character is Zal, but I have been told that is that's not a good name to give. And we'll get into that when we get to Zal's story, but I'm told it's too old-fashioned and my child will be made fun of if he's called Zal.
Your aunt, her name is Banu, is that right?
Yeah, I have my Amma Mahin. Her full name is Mahin Banu.
That's Rostam's daughter.
Yes. So legendary.
Not in the Shahnameh, but still.
She doesn't show up in the Shahnameh, but boy, are we going to cover her story. But yeah, there's a lot of different Persian names that people will get from the Shahnameh. And, oh gosh, I can't tell you. I'm just so excited to start reading this story. I think what we're going to do for this podcast is we'll read a little bit of it every week. And honestly, that's not going to be the only Persian thing that we'll cover in the podcast. We're going to cover the superstitions that we have. We're definitely going to talk about the good food. And we'll also kind of bring up the social rules. So you brought this up earlier. You mentioned Tarof. And I think that was one of the first things that you and I kind of had to figure out when we started dating.
That we had to dance around.
Yeah, because I was very used to Tarof, and you definitely were not.
Can I describe what Tarof is?
Yeah, go for it.
Tarof is like when you're with your family members at a restaurant having a nice time, and then suddenly the bill reaches the table. And it's not a split bill, it's a single bill for everybody. Mm-hmm. In that moment, you know, I'm going to have to be the one that pays that. I have to be otherwise I'm not going to let my cousin show me up, show
meanwhile,
everybody
your
how
cousin's
rich
reaching
he is.
across for the bill. Like, I'm
No,
gonna
you
pay
slap
for it.
his hand. You take Tarof is like that to the extreme. You slap his hand politely and say, "No, it is me. I will pay this."
Oh, you guys just slap hands politely, do you? We go into all-out fist fights in my culture. No.
Out there canceling each other's credit cards.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, there's a Iranian comedian out there called Kayvon, and he has on YouTube. He has a video.
Fantastic story about his uncle and his father fighting over a restaurant bill in increasingly improbable and horrifying ways until it gets to the point where they're canceling each other's credit cards in advance in order to keep them from paying the bill.
Yep. And so yeah, that's probably the best example. But I seem to remember that we had some problems with Tarof communication when we first started dating, and I have apologized.
You at least paid for the first date. You at least let me pay for the first date.
Yeah.
But after that, the check came to the table, you were on that thing. Yeah. And I couldn't convince you otherwise.
And that was just very much ingrained into me, like I better fight to pay the check. And you're a very quiet and reserved individual, so you didn't know of this whole be aggressively nice and try to pay for it thing. And meanwhile, here I was slapping down my credit card. I was like, oh gosh, I did the Tarof thing again. He's not going to argue. He doesn't know about that. I'm just going to let it go. And I remember, what was it? I think it was Valentine's Day, wasn't it? You pulled me aside and you said, can we talk?
We were buying like a Pizza Hut pizza and you were being a little extra about it. And I just finally decided to say, look, can you just let me pay for things? I feel terrible. Let me buy you something on Valentine's Day at least.
That's when I think I had to sit down and be like, listen, I'm kind of doing this thing I'm used to doing, and I had to explain Tarof to you. The nice thing is that after I explained it to you, you and I have gotten into some pretty epic battles over fighting for the bill and stuff.
Heck yeah, we have.
So, that is the most common. But here's the idea behind it. The idea behind Tarof is that the more humble, the more generous you are, the better of a person you are. And you really have to show that you are a good person by doing things for other people, by paying for other people. And people get very aggressive.
Some folks are into it, some people less so.
Especially if you're like you and me are very like easygoing, laid back people. We don't like getting aggressive. So it can get pretty intimidating to be in that situation.
And based on my experience, that a lot of like younger Iranian folks will specifically say no Tarof or Tarof Narkun.
Tarof Nakun.
Nakun. Sorry.
Yeah.
And it seems to be kind of the older generation where even if you do agree up front that we're not going to Tarof for the rest of the evening, they will still Tarof. It's ingrained into them that I have to be the one to like pay for everything we're doing tonight.
Well, I'm actually going to disagree on that because the last time my brother and I went to Iran to see family, all of us young cousins went out to eat at this breakfast place, and my mother handed us the card and said, you all be sure to pay for the meal. Little did we know, our uncle said the same thing to our cousin, and it ended up being that we were like sitting in the booths blocking each other and trying to snatch the card out of the other person's hands so that we could be the one to pay. So though in general the younger generation doesn't tout off as much, we still do tout off.
Oh yeah.
So
some habits die hard.
Yeah. So, of course, you try to pay for the bill. You insist on doing something or helping with some sort of task, basically so the other person can take it easy. So, this next one really only happens in Iran, but if you go into a store and you ask how much something is, or if you take a taxi, the first time you ask how much you owe, they're going to say, this item isn't worth your money. I don't need your money. It costs nothing. You do still need to pay. Do not take the item and walk out of the store.
Don't run away from the taxi cab.
Don't run away from the taxi cab. What they're doing is tarofing. They do actually want the money, but they do need to, try and at least put up the air of being generous. You have to say, I insist, please tell me the price, and then they will say it to you. That doesn't really happen here, but it will happen over there. You ask how much is it? They say, oh, it's nothing. You say, Chayish Mikona, and they say, okay, here it is. Here's the price, and then you pay. Here's another one. It has to do with food. Just pretend we have some tea. Here's Seth. Have some tea.
Oh, thank you. I would love some tea.
Oh my God, you are so rude.
What? I just
How
wanted the tea.
dare you? Okay, we're going to try that again. Here's Seth. Have some tea.
Oh, I couldn't possibly.
No. I insist. You should have this tea.
Oh, no. You should enjoy that tea.
Please, take the tea. It's going to make you feel so good.
I don't want the tea.
Okay, I guess I'll just put it away.
Well, I want the tea. What are you doing? You gonna leave me without tea?
Oh,
What kind of hole is this?
So, when it comes to food, you need to refuse food at least twice, maybe 3 times to be polite. If you accept it the first time, you are so rude. I will say that I have had this problem with, I get used to the tarof and saying no to food the first couple of times in Iran. Then when I come back here and someone offers me a glass of water or something and I say no, they don't offer again. And I'm like, oh God, I did the thing. Actually, can I have that glass of water? The last one, this is very similar to Southern culture. When you call somebody, you just call and say, hey, I'm calling you because...
Not unless it's for business.
Yeah, right? If you're calling a friend or a family member, what do you have to do?
Yeah, I gotta call my friend because she's a vet and I have some questions about the food I'm giving my cats. You don't want to be rude. You gotta say, hey, how's the family? How's your husband? How's your day been?
How's your kitty cats?
Yeah.
How's your health? You doing all right? Then you get to the reason for which you called. That's also Tarof thing. That's part of Tarof, is that you don't just call and be like, I need this thing from you. No, you go through the whole roundabout, find out how they are. You also have to talk about how you are, if they ask. And then once you get all that out of the way, be like, listen, the reason I called you is we gave this cat kibble and Radoberg is going crazy. Is it just her or is it the food? Oh my gosh. So we've taught you how to tarof. Took me 8 years, but I taught you how to tarof. I kind of told you about the origins of the Shahnameh, so I think that's a good time to wrap up our first episode.
I agree. It's been fun, but we got to save some for the next few episodes.
Yeah.
Next time on MazanderCast, I think we'll discuss a few stories in the Shahnameh. So if anyone there wants to pick up the book and read along, that would be great.
Yeah, so you can find it on Kindle for about $15. Or there's a really nice, pretty one with beautiful artwork. You can find it on Amazon for about $100. Whatever's in your budget.
And I think I'd like to learn a little bit more about the Zoroastrian religion. We brought it up a couple times while we've been talking about it, but it seems to be the source of a lot of this really interesting mythos. And from what I've educated myself on, it sounds like a pretty cool religion from the old world.
Yeah, so I think I can whip something up for us to learn about. But for the rest of our audience, want to keep up with us? You can follow us on Twitter at MazanderCast. That's MazanderCast. We will announce the next episode through our Twitter, so spread the word.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts and questions on the current and future episodes. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover or stories you want to share with us, then email us at MazanderCast@gmail.com. Same spelling as our Twitter handle.
Special thanks to Dr. Lynn for our cover art. You can check out more of her work at LorraineLynn.com. That's LorraineLIN.com.
We thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We hope you'll stick around for more in the future.
And as always, we hope you'll have good thoughts.
Good words.
And good deeds.
Hold on, Fez!